Good morning again. Today we're going to talk about criterion measurement and how to measure them. This topic is sort of a precursor to many other topics. We're going to be talking about things such as hiring, firing, promoting, all of these things. But in order to hire, fire, and promote, for example, you have to have criterion on which to do so. That is, criterion are, for a lack of a better word, try to keep it easy, standards on which you judge, something like that. Okay, so this particular topic is not about hiring or firing or anything of that nature, but creating the tools necessary to do many of the other jobs or other components of the IO site. So in this first presentation, we're simply going to go over defining what criterion are, and then in the second topic, we'll go over multiple criteria or combining them together. Okay, so to start here I go. Where are you? There you go. Performance criterion is difficult. As I said, I'm going to try to present them as though they're somehow independent from each other, but they're not. They're intimately tied together. Criterion that might be useful for hiring might not be useful for deciding promotion, right? I mean, it might be completely different. And behavior is very complicated, and any individual criterion doesn't measure the construct necessarily. So I say somebody's a good worker. What does it mean? We'll have to have these criterion in order to make that decision. So a criterion, as a definition anyway, evaluative standards that can be used as yardsticks for measuring employee success or failure. The most common criteria is performance, but we're going to talk a little bit about performance because performance is kind of, ultimately, performance in an IO psych sense is, does this employee make me money, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But what is performance? Number of products produced per hour, quality of products, amount of waste. I mean, they're all aspects of performance, right? So criteria are used here, as we say, to validate selection batteries, to make layoff decisions, promotion decisions, etc. A bad choice of criterion leads to bad employees. So when talking about criterion, we need to talk about two different things we're going to break down: the ultimate criterion and the actual criterion. Okay? The ultimate criterion is in some way, remember that concept of hypothetical constructs that we had the other day. A hypothetical construct is an imaginary thing that doesn't actually exist. Okay? And so the ultimate criterion in some way are going to define the hypothetical construct of a good worker, something of that nature. Okay? And so this is what we would like to measure, is this ultimate construct, ultimate criterion. But we're going to find that we fall short of that. So we're going to talk about the ultimate and the actual. So the difference between what we truly ultimately would like to do and what we actually do. Okay? So we try to approach these two together. This might be, as an example, for an administrative assistant, the ultimate criterion. In other words, a good administrative assistant will have high typing speed, high typing quality, high filing efficiency, etc. Good interactions with clients. But even though we're going to define this hypothetical construct of good using these, 12 different behaviors, again, we're going to have to take each one of these individual behaviors and define, what do you mean by has good interactions with clients? What is that? And if you remember that concept of operational definitions, any hypothetical construct must be operationally defined in terms of the behaviors used to measure it. And so interactions with clients would have to be operationally defined perhaps as number of clients that report positively about the interaction. I don't know. Some kind of quantifiable, repeatable, publicly observable behavioral measure for each of these subconstructs within this ultimate criterion. Okay? And so, there we go. I just said that the ultimate criterion is a goal, but the actual is what we actually use. And obviously, we want there to be overlap. What do I mean by overlap? Take a look. On the left side, the lighter blue circle is the ultimate criterion, what we ultimately want to have. The right side, bluer circle, is what we're actually measuring. And so we see the overlap there is what we want. We want a large overlap. In a perfect world, they would completely overlap on top of each other, right? But the problem is we can't do everything. We can't measure everything for a variety of reasons. In an example of, who should we hire? You can't give a new potential employee 500 different tests, right? It's just not possible. So you're going to just give them a subset of the ultimate criterion. Or some of the ultimate criterion might be difficult to quantify. Like, I don't know, it's not on here, but maybe there might be a criterion which might be ability to think on their feet or something like that, which would be a wonderful part of an ultimate criterion for an administrative assistant. Ability to think on their feet. Well, how the hell do you quantify that, right? How do you measure a new job applicant's ability to? And so it's really quite a difficult idea. You want it to overlap, but ultimately there will not be complete overlap. Okay? Another reason, well, yeah, you go. Because of cost, time, effort, okay, there's going to be less than perfect overlap. So when looking at criterion, we can talk about what makes them good, okay? And we'll break it down into relevance, reliability, sensitivity, practicality, and fairness. And we'll kind of pull each of these apart, and you can use this slide as a reference point for yourself. So relevant criterion a relevant criterion is one that overlaps. That is what am I trying to say? The actual criterion and the ultimate criterion overlap with each other. And so as an interesting look at this, relevance is the percentage of the variance in the ultimate criterion that can be accounted for by the actual criterion. Relevance in some kind of way is how big is this overlap, okay? Criterion deficiency, stuff in the ultimate measure not included in the actual measure. In other words, all of those things on the left side, the far left side of this image, filing efficiency, written communication, oral communication, creativity, that's criterion deficiency, because what's happening is that you would like to measure it, it's part of your ultimate criterion, and ultimately what makes a good worker, but you're not actually measuring it, it's deficient. Okay, so criterion deficiency, yeah, okay. No, that's not right. That's right there. Hello, there it is. Okay, criterion contamination, on the other hand, going back to this image, is those things on the far right. Okay, they're in your actual criterion, but they're not part of the ultimate criterion, like liking and attractiveness. Okay, and so what we find is that sometimes hiring decisions might be made like hiring a pretty administrative assistant, even though pretty administrative assistants, prettiness has nothing to do with success on the job. And so what we find is that anytime we use measures in the actual criterion that are not part of the ultimate criterion, we get criterion contamination. Okay? And so this criterion contamination comes from two different sources. The bias is what I just described. So giving evaluations based on things not part of the ultimate criterion, but also random measurement error. So for example, if I was to measure typing speed, but what happened was I did not have a good measure of typing speed. It was I gave the new hiree keyboard with sticky keys. All right, some stupid thing like that. And then all of a sudden what will happen is that the typing speed will be an inaccurate reflection of what the true typing speed is. Okay? And so the idea is that this notion on the far right, liking, attractiveness, age, and status, that is part of the bias of criterion contamination. But criterion contamination also occurs down the center here in the overlap if I'm not doing an accurate measure. Okay? My actual criterion includes typing speed, but I gave them a faulty, keyboard. So clearly it's not relevant anymore. Okay? Where am I? Yeah, there you go. All right. The second criteria for criteria, I like it, reliability. The stability or consistency. The reliability is awful similar to this notion of random measurement error. The reliability is whether or not it's the same over and over. See, now this measurement error was sticky keyboard, okay? But check out this one. Ooh, come on, there it is. Let's say, for example, I gave somebody a typing test and they measured 40 words per minute. 110, 50, 90, 76. It's unreliable. We learned about reliability in topic 2 a little bit, okay? The problem is what is an accurate measure? Is 40 an accurate measure of this person's true ability and therefore they're a bad typist? Or is 110 an accurate measure of their true ability and they're an excellent typist? So we just don't know all of a sudden if the criterion are not reliable. Look at this. This is pretty good. Unreliable criteria do not help us because they do not accurately tell us what's going on about the actual construct that's underneath. Okay? Third criteria for criteria, sensitivity. A sensitive criteria must be able to discriminate a good from a bad worker. Okay? And so take a look, you've got a factory and you want to create criteria for promotion or something in your factory. And it turns out that in the factory you're making valve stems. I don't know, they go up inside of tires. And each worker produces 22 to 24 valve stems per hour. It's not a sensitive criterion. And so if you used this valve stems per hour as a criteria, you're not discriminating between who is good and bad on the job because there's no room for nothing there. Instead, you need to find a more sensitive, right? Like we had kind of described, a more sensitive measure of performance in this case is not valve stems per hour, but instead quality, okay? Or how much waste is produced in the production of these valve stems. So you'd have to come up with a better way to literally discriminate good from bad. The third or fourth or whatever this says, practicality. And practicality is a practical concern. Some decision criterion will not be made by the decision makers. And so you could be the IO psychologist and you develop wonderful criteria, but for some strange reason, the CEO or whoever, I guess CEO, whoever is making decisions over in the HR department, look at it and go, oh, that just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter if you have the scientific backing to prove that it's a good criteria. If the HR won't use it, it doesn't help. Okay, so practicality is, and this is actually kind of related to a different topic. The word kind of buzzed through one of the slides in topic 3, I think. I can't remember. The word is human factors. Human factors is a discipline of psychology. It's related to IO psychology, but it's clearly distinctly different. But human factors is is an application of psychology where you think about the human beings and how they interact with technology, something like that. And so what we find is, and I mean, I'm going to badmouth some engineers now. Here we go. I've had some conversations with engineers, and you talk to them, and they're going to tell you, oh, I created this, and it was the most efficient design. And I go, but what about the human beings that use it? How do they use it? Okay, and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. This is more efficient. And I just headbutt with these engineers and say, yes, but that's not how humans think. That's not how human beings operate. And this is what it means by impractical. Even if it is technically the, quote, best, if it's not the way humans work or what humans will do, don't do it. Okay? So it is really a critical important, it's, like I say, overlap with that notion of human factors. And finally, the last criteria for criterion is fairness. Anybody that has ever had children knows what happens. If you reward one child or use some decision to give one child a reward over the other, and the other one says no fair, you are going to have chaos on your hands. And the same thing happens in an IO setting. If workers view the standards, the criteria as unfair, you will have anarchy. Okay? You will have unhappy workers. We'll talk this in more depth in topic 7. I don't know, topic 7 maybe, worker stress. I don't remember what that is. But anyway, what happens is, of course, employees that are unhappy get bad customer service. They sue for discrimination. They steal things. They commit workplace violence. Okay? So clearly criteria must be deemed as fair. And so putting it together, if your criteria are not relevant, reliable, sensitive, practical, or fair, don't use them. Okay? So that's the goal. Create as much overlap as possible while having that overlap be relevant, reliable, sensitive, practical, and fair. All right. See you in a little while.